Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times with your 2024 NXT No Mercy instant analysis. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and we are here just minutes after the NXT No Mercy premium live event went off the air to break down every single thing that happened on the first of multiple NXT special events that will be hitting your screens over the next couple of months. NXT Halloween Havoc, of course, is coming up, and the debut of NXT on the CW with two major shows in Chicago and St. Louis. But we're not focused on any of that tonight. We are focused on NXT No Mercy, and the Silver King is about to deliver you a full breakdown of every single match from that No Mercy card with results, analysis, and grades. But before we get to any of that, allow me to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. The latter for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show. And when you follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast, you get to vote in pre and post show polls surrounding premium live events like this one. And of course, your pre-show expectation grades and your final grades do factor into our analysis in our grading segment at the end of this episode. So be sure to follow us and be sure to vote when those polls show themselves. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead and support the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Head on over to buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audios to every major show, and exclusive news posts on Fridays. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, this is the normal part of our instant analysis episodes where the Silver King would crack open a cold one. But because I am handling this show solo, I'm not going to go ahead and do that and let it get, warm while I'm speaking extemporaneously for the better part of 45 minutes or so. Because of that, we're going to save it for AEW All Out, obviously WWE Bad Blood, all the big shows coming up. The Silver King has a stocked refrigerator of craft beer, so we just will not hit that tonight. But that does remind me to remind you that we have another instant analysis in our podcast feed that you absolutely should not miss. Vintage Chris Vanini and your boy, we jumped on the horn shortly after WWE Bash in Berlin ended Saturday evening, and we gave you a hell of an instant analysis, if I do say so myself, a little Barry Horowitz right there. But we've gotten a lot of comments about it, thanking us for diving into WWE creative and booking and the way they have been handling these B-level premium live events, particularly in Europe, besides just the match results and all that stuff. So please go listen to that if you have not already. I know a few of you haven't listened yet because we did publish the episode later Saturday than we normally would, just due to the college football season getting started in week 1. But that is in your feed, and make sure you listen to the WWE Bash in Berlin instant analysis before our WWE episode coming on Tuesday. Of course, we'll be back on Thursday with our next NXT and AEW episode. But that is all in the future. Let's talk about the present. We're coming out of NXT No Mercy, and we have an absolute ton to talk about. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get you to the NXT No Mercy instant analysis. Now, before I get into everything, apparently the broadcast feed through Peacock on televisions and computers had an audio mix that was different than what the phones received, and it sounded differently as well from what WWE used for clips it posted on social media. I just found this out right before starting the show. I also spoke with one of our listeners, Joey at JNizer17, who was there in person in Denver. He gave us the lay of the land when it came to the crowd reaction. He said fans were quiet for large swaths of the show, so that was legit. But they got deafening in certain points. That did not come across on television. So any comments I make coming up here about crowd noise or audio, that's how I experienced it watching it live. It's possible it was louder than what we experienced at home. Or if you're only watching clips online, you're like, Silver King, what are you talking about? It was way louder than that. I can only give you the experience that I had watching from my couch with my laptop. That's the best I can do. So let's go ahead, break this card down. We're going to go in order of match importance, not just the reverse order of the way NXT gave it to us. Let's kick it off, though, where NXT concluded, and that was Ethan Page versus Joe Hendry for the NXT Championship. Trick Williams, the special guest referee, met with each competitor before the match. It was obviously friendly with Hendry and contentious with Page. Ethan also got a solo heel promo in gorilla position before he walked out. Hendry hit a few big suplexes. Fans chanted, "Put on some clothes," referring to the concert from Tuesday. So I guess it got over way more with fans at home than it did with me. Hendry tried an avalanche chokeslam. Page turned it into a power slam off the middle rope. Hendry came back with an avalanche fallaway slam before throwing himself over the top rope outside. Page answered with Ego's Edge onto the ring apron for a 9.5 count from Trick. Back inside, Hendry hit Ego's Edge on Page for a false finish and a huge sequence, including another fallaway slam that really got the crowd going wild. They started stomping and chanting, "We believe," as Hendry hit the standing O chokeslam. Williams pulled up his 3 count because Page's leg was underneath the bottom rope. Page ran Hendry into Williams and then hit his own chokeslam with a backup referee running in for a 2 count. Page tried to use the title, so Hendry rolled him up. Page then DDT'd Hendry onto the title, which was just laying on the canvas, so it was legal. And the referee went to count 3. But Trick slid in, put his body underneath his arm, and stopped the count. Page swung, and he hit the second referee instead of Trick. And with Trick distracted, checking on the ref, Page low-blowed Hendry, and then he hit Ego's Edge, which landed right on the upper part of the shoulder blade. He was totally fine, Hendry, but it was as close as you could get to being super dangerous. And Trick reluctantly counted 1, 2, 3 as Page retained the title in just over 15 minutes. Page grinned and he clowned Williams right in his face. His eyes were really wide, staring at him. He continued mocking and taunting him with a thumbs up as he got his arm raised. And I thought it was the best character work and pure ass hattery that Page has ever done in NXT to this point. It was legitimately hysterical the way he clowned Trick. Even now, thinking about it again, I'm actually smiling as I talk because he looked like the exact type of smug asshole that you just want to punch right in the face. I loved it. And then after that happened, Pete Dunne attacked Williams with a bitter end ringside to end the show. They, of course, are fighting on Tuesday. Now, look, was this the best technical match? Of course it wasn't. Page is extremely strong in the ring. He's not flashy. Hendry's moveset is rather basic because he's all gimmick. But a buddy who watches TNA, he texted me and he said, this may have been the best Hendry match he's ever seen in ring-wise. The crowd was wild for this. And though I disagreed initially, given what happened in the women's match, for this to be in the main event spot, ultimately this was the correct final match for this show. The reactions to Trick and Hendry were super hot in terms of their entrances. The fans were all in as soon as the bell rang. I had a decent issue with the finish. The backup official ran out immediately, faster than any referee in wrestling history when the main guy went down. You would have thought this dude was Usain Bolt. He got out there so fast. And it made far less sense for that to be the case here because Trick is a wrestler and he only got tackled. It's not like he got hit with a title or a finisher or something like that. His recovery as an athlete should be far quicker than a pedestrian. Now, everything else besides that was fine, including Trick stopping the count because Page used Hendry to take him out. For a second, I thought the booking I came up with on the Ultimate Preview was about to transpire with Josh Alexander running in. But you got to admit, even though I was kind of guessing, it was super close with what they did here. Page was the right winner, of course. Hendry got an excused loss. NXT still only has one clean win over TNA. That happened this past Tuesday. The disparity has got to be 1-12 at this juncture. It's actually crazy that's the case. Anyway, this definitely exceeded expectations. It was a top 2 or 3 match on the show, depending what you felt about some of the openers. I went 3.75 stars, B+. And it was announced that Paige will defend the NXT title on the first episode that airs on the CW. That's going to be on Tuesday, October 2nd. My guess right now is that Trick is the opponent and CM Punk is the special guest referee. And I would assume if that happens, they change the title at that juncture. We'll put a pin in this. We'll circle back as it develops. You'll remember on the Ultimate Preview, I said I really don't believe Trick should win the title back this soon. There's no harm in Paige continuing to hold the title and going on a decent run. He's doing a great job as NXT champion. And yeah, Trick is more over. And yeah, the ratings were higher when Trick was champion. I don't know if correlation equals causation in this case, but regardless, the way things are looking right now, that is my expectation for that show, October 2nd on the CW. Let's move to the co-main event. The women's NXT championship was on the line. Roxanne Perez defending against Jada Parker. Jada got a walk and talk promo for her entrance. Roxy got her lick back early, slapped her across the face, rammed Jada with her injured ribs thrice into the steel steps. Really nice selling by Parker on that. Perez dominated and concentrated on the ribs. They got dual chants going back and forth. She even did the teardrop and the LeBron James high step taunt that Jada normally does. Parker caught her leg on a kick attempt and audibly and visually said, "You fucked up," twice right into Roxy's face before hitting a Liger bomb and a catch spinebuster. Jada followed with a really nice avalanche-style teardrop, but her ribs gave out as she tried a suplex of some kind. She came back with an inverted vertical suplex. Perez countered Hypnotic into a crossface and a butterfly submission, but Parker powered out directly into a Samoan drop. She missed a Vader bomb, but avoided Pop Rocks, and then Roxy got hung up in the ropes and bounced outside, getting hit by Hypnotic. Parker attempted Hypnotic again ringside, but she ended up driving herself into the barricade because Roxy avoided it. And Perez took advantage by hitting Pop Rocks onto the broken piece of barricade. The crowd was so into this, they actually did the referee's 10 count as they were outside the ring. And I'm not saying that's never happened before. It certainly has in the past. I can't remember the last time I heard a crowd count a count out like that, a double count out in this case, for two people. As soon as they both got back inside, Perez took advantage, nailed Parker with Pop Rocks, and retained the title in 15 minutes. She immediately cradled and kissed the title, holding it close to her chest after the bell. And you had a feeling something was coming, and she was doing that for a reason. This match was excellent. The only element holding it back was Parker's inexperience. And that's not a knock on her at all. This is developmental, and it's just reality. She's only been wrestling for a year. When they run this match back, let's say, in 2 or 3 years from now, you might be talking about a classic between these two. It just goes to show how Jada's skill level is already so crazy high, despite her still being a neophyte in this business, especially her presence. You feel the aura there with her. I hate using that word because I know it's trendy these days, but it's true. Her character work is exceptional. She sells like a veteran. The offense can and will improve. Her ceiling is so immensely high. We've discussed this ad nauseum on the podcast. I feel like we were ahead of the trend praising Jada Parker. And you guys know I compared her to a young Triple H, Paul Levesque, from the standpoint of she could be a top tier main roster heel in the main event scene for the women for like a decade. That's how good Jada Parker is and how high her ceiling exists right now. Roxy was the ring general here. She completely commanded the match. Again, she's 22 years old and doing that on a major WWE premium live event. NXT, sure, still WWE. Her heel antics were fantastic. I tweeted this, but it's true. It's a broke take saying she's a bad heel. The woke take is that she's better as a heel than a babyface, at least more interesting. I love her character work of late. I don't care that she has a high-pitched voice and that she's small. You can still be a heel and be tiny, okay? This is the second best women's title reign in NXT history, behind only Asuka, and I'd actually put her ahead of Io Shirai right now. The prodigy gimmick is no joke. She is a prodigy. Now, they worked a slower style because of the in-ring story with the ribs, and that was almost certainly done on purpose because Jada has probably never been out there wrestling a 15, 20-minute match with any regularity. Probably was the longest singles match of her entire career. I didn't check, but that's my guess. 4 stars, A-. For me, it was the match of the night, pretty much without question. Now, just as Roxy was holding her title tight after the bell, and commentary mentioned she's only a couple of defenses away from tying Asuka for the NXT record, the lights went out, smoke filled the stage, and Giulia officially made her debut out of Japan. Talk about aura and screen presence. Wow. Okay. She got right in Roxy's face. Perez held the title high. They stared down. The crowd was going wild behind them. And unfortunately, it cut off there. I did wish that it lasted a little longer. And I really hoped it might be one of those moments where more than one person debuts. But even with it just being Giulia, it was quite a moment. Cannot remember the last time there was an NXT debut like that. It's possible there hasn't been one since the black and gold era, but I could be forgetting someone. Coming in, I thought this should have main evented. With the benefit of hindsight following the last match, the men's match, this was appropriately in the co-main event spot. It's just that NXT is the one, major brand, I'm not counting TNA here, where you can count on women getting the opportunity to main event major shows. And given the debut of Giulia, it would have made a lot of sense for them to do it, but I understand why they did not. Now, for those of you who may not know Giulia, and there's certainly no fault if you do not, she's a British-born but Italian and Japanese descent wrestler. Talk about, by the way, winning the genetic lottery there. And she made her career in Japan wrestling for Stardom and more recently Marigold. That's an offshoot promotion created by Stardom's longtime chief. You can Google Giulia against Tam Nakano, Suri, Mayu Iwatani. You'll get a handful of her best matches if you do that. Her best was probably against Suri from Queendom 2022. That's a Stardom show. You can definitely find that one. Oh, and she's also super stylish. That's the other thing to know about her. She always switches up her look. It's possible she doesn't do that in WWE. They really like uniformity for action figures and video games and stuff like that. But hopefully they still give her that freedom because it's a big part of her presentation. The only real criticism I had here is Giulia comes out, she debuts, and Vic Joseph on the mic, he's screaming, "The rumors are true. She's here. Giulia's in WWE." But they didn't tell us why it's a big deal. They didn't say she dominated Japan, the same promotion that made Io Sky and Kairi Sane and stuff like that. It's okay to make a big deal out of someone appearing. But, vintage Chris Vanini and I, we've said this about AEW when there's debuts. It happened with Ricochet at All In. If you just say, "Oh my God, the rumors are true, they're here," it's like, cool, but why does this matter? Now, for me, it's a little different. Ricochet has been on WWE television for, the better part of 5, 6, 7 years. So people are familiar with him. People aren't really familiar with Giulia. And I would have liked as a viewer, although I knew a little bit more about her than some, I would have liked them to sell it and tell us why she's a big deal, why it's important she's there, and also how screwed Roxanne Perez now is because they're going face to face in the middle of the ring. Had this been, the main event segment, maybe they would have felt like they had more time to do it. But just on an apples to apples comparison, Michael Cole and Corey Graves, I think it was actually just Corey Graves now that I think about it, did a better job selling the debuts of Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa than Vic Joseph and Booker T here did for Giulia. And that probably should not be the case given this is such a big deal for NXT. So that was the one criticism I had. Other than that, when you talk about the match, the visual of her debut, I'll say it for a third time, even though I hate using the word in 2024, the aura of it all with Giulia and Roxy in the middle of the ring together was pretty special. And the women definitely shined on this show, at least from the main event perspective, co-main event perspective. Let's go ahead and move on to the men's North American Championship. Oba Femi defending against Tony D'Angelo.
Oh, we got two big meaty men bumping me tonight.
D'Angelo was wearing pinstripe suit pants instead of the old velour. That was a huge improvement visually. There was an odd moment early where Tony turned his ankle and also may have simultaneously been kneed in the balls. So he literally crumpled in pain rather than take a uranagi. I've never seen that before, but for anyone who is listening and does not have that on the exterior of your body, I promise you the pain from that can be debilitating. It picked up from there. Femi did an overhead fisherman suplex and a shoulder breaker similar to Papa Shango. Great call from Vic on commentary. D'Angelo DDT'd Femi on the apron and hit an overhead belly-to-belly suplex, fisherman suplex, and power slam. He also did an electric chair. Oba stole a crowbar from Luca Crucifino ringside and destroyed both him and Stacks before D'Angelo dodged a shoulder tackle into the steel steps. Tony came back with a truly excellent spear, like form tackle style, but Oba hit a lifted toss. D'Angelo escaped a powerbomb, then surprisingly kicked out of a pop-up powerbomb. He escaped another and hit an almighty spinebuster. The family tried to rally Tony in the corner while he was pretty much dead, but he ate a running shoulder, a powerbomb, and then a Liger bomb from Femi, who got the pinfall to retain the title in 13 minutes. I very much enjoy Oba being a powerbomb machine. I would love to see him develop a few more variations. A last ride, a bouncing version off the ropes. He should have, 6 or 7 different types of power bombs that he can hit at any given time based on the situation, where the wrestler is in the ring. Are they on the ropes? Are they, does he have to lift them? Does he catch them? Whatever the case might be. It would be cool for him to have his finisher be a version of a power bomb, and you never know which one is actually going to end the match. In a similar fashion to what Gunther is like, except obviously Gunther is like power bomb, splash, chop, lariat. It's a little bit different. But I like that idea. I don't know if they're going to do it, but for me, that would work for Femi. This was the only one of the 4 undercard matches that I felt over-delivered to expectation. Femi is so far beyond his experience level that it's honestly ridiculous. Despite that, D'Angelo carried the match. He was the stronger worker between the two. Not a surprise by any means. But look.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
And that's what we got to see. I would have probably worked in a couple extra meaty moments, but this went off quite well. 3.75 stars B+, 3.5 slabs of beef. I did not expect D'Angelo to win here. I did wonder to myself coming out of this when he's actually going to get a victory in a significant match. Like, sure, he had a tag team title. He had a Heritage Cup run. It feels like he should have at least already had a North American title reign at some point, or even if it's not a title, get a win or two over a top tier wrestler. You know what I mean? He's decently underrated, and I think it's the gimmick is the reason why. The ceiling for him is just far higher individually than D'Angelo family as a gimmick will ultimately allow. And I am kind of curious to see what happens with his career. Do they keep him in NXT? That way D'Angelo family stays together. Do they bring him up individually, let them continue on their own in a similar fashion to what happened with Santos Escobar? And it's a pretty funny parallel when you consider they feuded for a period of time. I'm going to be curious to see what NXT decides with him going forward, because the truth is, in terms of skill level and ability, he can talk, he can wrestle. He is pretty much ready for the main roster. Let's move to the Women's North American Championship. Kalani Jordan against Wendy Chu. Lani did a slingshot splash and a handspring moonsault. Chu came back with a nice sequence, including a basement flatliner. Lani did a handspring back elbow in the middle of the ring, which looked way cooler than it did in the corner. She also hit a rope-assisted DDT rolled into a DDT-style X-Factor. Chu no-sold a couple moves, so Lani stomped the shit out of her and hit a frog splash. Wendy did a ringside suplex and a powerbomb out of the corner, plus a full Nelson Uranagi. Chu slipped, leading to a total botch from both of them off the ropes. They just fell down. She caught Lani in that unnamed clutch sleeper, which badly needs a name because it's such a unique move. But Lani lifted her arm on the drop. She did a handspring that added absolutely nothing to an STO and hit a 450 plus one of the kind to retain the title in 13 minutes. One of a kind, not one of the kind. Not nearly as successful as the Sol Ruca match, and that's because their combined athleticism in that match overcame their inexperience. Chu obviously cannot work that same style, so this was slower. And that exposed how green Lani remains at this juncture in her career. Again, I hate repeating myself. She was not ready for this title. She's not making it mean anything, and the title is not taking her to any higher level than her just wrestling as a single would. If you didn't know a title was on the line in this match, it would have worked out the exact same way. There was nothing special about it. There was really no drama to it. I feel like other wrestlers are not getting opportunities they should be around the Women's North American Championship because Lani has it. The aforementioned botch was the only notable issue, but the match never felt like it got out of third gear. It didn't necessarily fall below my expectations because those were low to start, despite the fact that I've long supported Wendy and I believe Lani can be something. Though every time I see Jordan wrestle these days, her ceiling just continuously ticks down a little bit for me. I'm going 2.75 stars, C+. I enjoyed the match. I'm glad it got time. I like both of them a lot. I just want to repeat that because I feel like people are going to get upset. But at the end of the day, it was just okay. Like I said on the Ultimate Preview, this did not belong on No Mercy. It was an hour one TV match at best. Now, Wendy sat up in the ring after the bell. She held her pillow, only for Tatum Paxley to emerge from underneath the ring and catch her from behind in a choke-style sleeper. She knocked Wendy out and then placed a doll version of herself, Tatum, on the pillow, and she posed a little bit, and that went into the break. I'm glad Paxley's getting a story. She's getting a match set up on a significant show. I'm not sure whether there have been injury issues or other considerations, but she's been underutilized for pretty much the last year now. Hopefully, this is the start of something significant for her. She would be a great option to take the title off Lonnie over the next month or two. Regarding Wendy, hopefully Tatum beats her and Chu reverts back to her babyface gimmick, because this sleep paralysis demon, I understand they wanted to do something different when she came back, but it's still unexplained why she's this gimmick. I mean, they did the vignettes and stuff, but why is she a demon now? Why is she angry and dark? And what's the end goal of this gimmick, right? It's not something that's going to work on the main roster. So do they see her as just an NXT performer and that's what she's going to be in her career? And if so, that's fine. But I thought that original gimmick had a chance to develop into something, and Wendy wrestled really well. I think coming off of the knee injury, she's slower. She probably has some ring rust, trying to find herself a little bit, and the gimmick also is not working as well. So the package just is not as solid as it was when she got injured before she took her long break. Let's move to the Tag Team Championship. Chase U defending against Fraxium. This opened the show. Ridge Holland had a solid hot tag, catching Axiom flying for a power slam, and then surprising with a flying headbutt. Axiom set up for an avalanche Spanish fly, but got knocked down as Nathan Frazier ran into the ropes. That allowed Andre Chase to flip it. He did the Spanish fly immediately into a high-impact Liger bomb. There was a strange tope sequence before Axiom hit a frog splash. Frazier nailed a springboard 450 for a false finish. Chase U then combined for a doomsday device, with Ridge surprisingly as the flyer. Next, they hit a buckle bomb head kick and Holland's old finisher for a broken fall. Frazier hit a superplex with the golden ratio into a brainbuster for another false finish. Chase avoided another golden ratio. Axiom accidentally knocked out Frazier instead. Chase U then combined for the powerbomb backstabber. Frazier was dead on the canvas, and Axiom kicked out for a legit surprise false finish. Holland got eliminated with a tope con hero before Fraxium consecutively hit a Spanish fly and Phoenix Splash for the 1-2-3 to reclaim the tag team titles in 13 minutes after just 19 days. Duke Hudson and Riley Osborne expressed disappointment after the bell. They kind of gave Holland a side eye. So after the new champions left the ring, Holland attacked both of them, ramming them into the barricade and the steel steps. He clotheslined the hell out of Chase, dumped him outside, menacingly stared down Thea Hale when she touched him, and then took Chase out with a cradle DDT called the Redeemer on the announce table. The crowd chanted one more time. Thea gave them such a look of disgust that I audibly laughed out loud. She is a national treasure, and that's pretty much how it all ended. Now, obviously, we called this result on the Ultimate Preview, and it was super refreshing to have a short back and forth title change to help develop a storyline. In this case, a heel turn. First on the match, really good. The crowd was strange because it popped for the big moments and it was fully attentive, yet it did not raise the tenor of the atmosphere for the final few minutes. So it all kind of just happened. And by the way, on the Lonnie match with Wendy, the crowd was just dead for the entire thing. The WWE Performance Center, with like less than 1/10 of the fans that were in this arena, they created a better atmosphere for the initial title change when Chase U won the straps by direct comparison to this. Still, these guys worked their asses off, and putting the titles back on the best tag team in WWE was clearly the right decision, as we discussed earlier this week. Chase was arguably the MVP of the match. He was awesome. The powerbomb backstabber false finish totally got me. I thought the match was over right there. 3.75 stars, B+. Holland's turn was extremely well executed. It was clear something was going to happen in the storyline. We speculated it might be Hudson and Osborne turning, but Holland simultaneously made more sense given Chase U has developed itself as like a tight-knit group. It was also, though, disappointing at the same time because big bad heel Ridge is a character we've already known. It's just not as fresh as the alternative. Chase U fully rehabbed Holland, made him interesting. I'm going to be really curious to see what happens now that he's back on his own. I'm concerned about that. At least he has something to sink his teeth into. If this ultimately does not work, it could be an end of the line situation for him. I don't mean to put that out there. That is what it seems like this is going to become. Like if this works and he gets over, fantastic. If not, this is going to be like the fourth or fifth cycle of a gimmick and storyline that he's been given. And at that point you say, where else is there to go? So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it gets over. Chase, you are huge baby faces. So Holland Tuesday on NXT should be a massive heel, get loudly booed. And as long as he can carry that character, then all systems go. And let's move to the last match that we're going to cover on the card, the sixth match. Wesley against Zach Wentz. This was second on the show. Wentz entered with the TNA X Division Championship, which I believe he just won on Friday. It was really wild seeing that on WWE TV. He was also announced as the X Division champion. Lee had a slightly updated theme, I believe. The crowd barely cared about this. The audio on Peacock was super odd here. There was like some fuzzy noise and you couldn't really hear the crowd. And like I said, they were dead anyway for the vast majority of the match. Lee did a full flip when barely touched with a PK. Wentz hit some high risks and did a really cool roll through of a Meteora into a Boston Crab. Lee followed a Hurricanrana with, I believe, a springboard Phoenix Splash. It was a bad camera angle. Also, the cardiac kick, his finisher for a false finish. Wentz hit a blockbuster-style DDT, which was super impressive. Lee bounced off the ropes for a Meteora. Wentz then dodged him knees first into the steel steps. Lee threw Wentz on the announce table, and it completely collapsed under his weight, which you never see that happen to a WWE announce table. This did come after Holland did the Redeemer to Chase, so theoretically it got weakened, but still, you just never see something like that happen. So at that juncture, Lee basically changed his plan, and he did some combination of a flying Meteora, double stomp, swerve stomp, whatever you want to call it. He did that off the top rope to the floor ringside because he couldn't crash into the table with what was probably going to be a frog splash or elbow drop or, something like that. He ran Wentz into the ring post and he tossed the X Division title aside, only for Trey Miguel to grab a steel chair that Lee was going to use out of his own hands. Wentz caught him with a Canadian Destroyer, jumping off the ring apron to ringside, and then back in the ring, he hit his finisher, which is a springboard UFO cutter, to get the victory in between 13 and 14 minutes. Later backstage, Wentz was happy he won, sad he lost a brother, and the Rascals challenged Fraxium for the titles. This was one of the oddest matches I have watched in a long time, and I legitimately have no idea how to grade it. The crowd was almost dead for 5/6 of the match, but they went wild for the finish, and deservingly so, because the finish was awesome with the Destroyer and the UFO. So they were doing like some fun athletic moves in the early going, but they had a lessened impact, at least on me as a viewer, because no one really seemed to care. And some of the kicks and stuff they were doing just kept missing. There were a couple TNA chants for Wentz, given he was the face, and Lee was obviously not his usual exciting self here too. Wentz showed out far more than Lee did comparatively. I felt stupid when it ended because a finish like that involving Miguel and protecting the TNA talent was so obvious in hindsight. And it was the right decision too, especially given Wentz just won the title 48 hours earlier. Of course, we did not know that when we did our predictions in the Ultimate Preview. The Destroyer off the apron and the UFO, like I said, they were both crazy good moves. It's an A finish. I'm going with a B for the match, 3.5 stars. I admittedly might be low on this one. Like I said, it was tough for me to judge watching it live. I would not be at all surprised after this if Wentz is brought back to WWE when his TNA contract ends, because that dude showed out here, and all that other stuff is pretty much in the past. My understanding is that WWE didn't even want to release him when they initially did, but they felt like they had no choice. So folks, that wraps up NXT No Mercy. That's a full breakdown, of course, of all 6 matches. with your grades and analysis. So let's go ahead and get to the final segment on the show where we discuss our overall grade for NXT No Mercy. Before we get to the final grade, we got to start with the pre-show expectation grade. The Silver King on the Ultimate Preview thought this would be an 87 out of 100, a B+. And you, our listeners, our followers, our Getting Overheads, you got the opportunity to vote on Twitter at Getting Overcast. The pre-show results for you were 28% A, 63% B, 7% C, 2% D to F, which of course is ridiculous. That averaged out to an 87.3 out of 100, an 87, just like the Silver King, and a B+, just like the Silver King. So all of us were on the exact same page going into the show. Now, before I give you my grade, I did have one note. All 4 undercard matches went 13 minutes and change. The greatest variance in time between the longest and the shortest was literally 25 seconds. That was simultaneously positive because everyone got legitimate time and focus, and frustrating because some matches could have used more time than others. Even the co-main events went 15 minutes each, so they hardly got any more time than the undercard. It was too formulaic for me from a timing standpoint, and if memory serves, this is the second straight NXT PLE where I've thought something like this. I bet most probably didn't notice, but given the way that I'm tasked with breaking it down match by match for the show, it did stand out to me. I would have loved for, one main event to get 18 minutes, the other gets 15, and then on the other undercard, you get a 13, an 8, and an 11, something like that. The matches should feel different. Instead, the formula through which they all went from a little bit slow at the start, picked up in the middle, and then really, really hot finish. It was pretty much the same in all 6 matches on the card. Doesn't make them bad. No criticism on the work that was done, but it was noticeable. Again, at least for me. I felt like I nailed this analysis on the Ultimate Preview in terms of the card being a bit underwhelming, Lonnie Wendy not belonging on No Mercy, the lack of diversity in the matches, no stipulations, everything one-on-one except the tag team title match. That did limit the ceiling for the show. As I said a moment ago, I gave it an 87 out of 100, a low B+ earlier this week. I figured the ceiling was an A-, and that's pretty much how it played out. I was at a B for this before the co-main events. Both of those delivered. Like I said, they were 2 of the 3 best matches on the entire card. Roxy and Jada was the best match, and you could definitely make an argument that Paige and Hendry was the second best. So ultimately, I'm a bit higher than my expectation grade, but really not that much. I'm at an 88 out of 100. That's still a B+, but that's okay. There was a lot to like about the show, including multiple feuds and angles that developed for television. We got the debut of Giulia. That was huge, but it was identical to Bash in Berlin in that the only title that changed hands was the tag belts, and that happened just 19 days ago on NXT television. Just like in Bash in Berlin, the only title that changed hands were the women's tag team titles, and those have been the only title that changed hands on non-WrestleMania and SummerSlam premium live events as of late. At the same time, when it comes back to No Mercy, I didn't really believe any of the singles challengers should have won those titles. So I agreed with all of the decisions, but when you're watching that, and it's time and time again, defense, no stipulations, no triple threats, there was, of course, the special guest referee for the main event, sure, but it was still a singles match, and the referee really didn't factor into it until the very end. So a really good, entertaining show. Glad I watched it live. We got a huge debut with Giulia, but for me, this was pretty much the definition of a B+ show. Nothing wrong with it. 5 out of 6 matches delivered in one way or another, and 2 huge moments at the end. Now that's my final grade. What did you, our Getting Overheads, think about it? We, of course, posted our poll on Twitter at Getting Overcast, and while it is still technically live as we tape this, your votes are pretty much in. They don't change that much in the final few minutes of the poll. 32% of respondents said it was A+ 2A, 51% said it was A- 2B+, and 17% said it was B to B-, no votes for C+ or lower. That averages out to a 91 out of 100, so a clear A- and 3 points better than you got from the Silver King, and that's, totally acceptable. Like I said, the A- was, for me, the ceiling of the show. I don't believe it got there, but we're really close to one another. We pretty much agree that this was a high quality show that didn't over deliver to any type of degree where it's must watch and a classic, and you need to, make sure you tell all your friends about it. But at the same time, for NXT to see the talent on that brand deliver on a stage like this, really my only wish was that the crowd was more consistent throughout the entire show. It was in Denver. Perhaps the edibles, either took time to kick in or took time to wear off, one way or the other. But ultimately, I thought NXT did deliver here, and I'm extremely curious to see what this show is going to look like as it continues on the road for 3 big shows away from the WWE Performance Center over the next 2 months. You have, like I said, the 2 debut shows on the CW. Those are going to be in Chicago and St. Louis. And you also have NXT Halloween Havoc, which will emanate from Hershey, Pennsylvania at the end of October. So super interesting to see whether NXT can kind of maintain this momentum. And besides CM Punk and Randy Orton, whether some other main roster superstars are kind of thrown into the shows, and NXT Halloween Havoc in particular, to kind of amp stuff up with the debut happening on the CW. And of course, that pretty major show happening in late October. So folks, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Allow me to remind you, like right off the top, we have your WWE Bash in Berlin instant analysis show waiting for you in the podcast feed. So if you have not listened to it yet, make sure that you do before our next WWE episode this coming Tuesday. This coming Thursday, we will have your next NXT show along with your AEW All Out Ultimate preview, so you do not want to miss either of those. Now it's time to take care of some business. Allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcast and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. We're at like 466 reviews. I just want to get to 500. If we can get there, that would be awesome. I know how many of you listen to the show. I know how many of you have not left reviews that yet. Please go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You also get to vote in the pre and post show polls around premium live events and pay-per-views, as we've mentioned multiple times on this episode. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, bonus instant reaction audios to every major TV show, and exclusive news posts on Fridays. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all for listening to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. This is the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.